Ready whenever you are.
Hi, Dr. Zwelling here, talking to you again about dieting. This is dieting part 2. In part 1, we talked about the 3 basic food elements: protein, carbohydrate, and fat. Now I'm going to give you some specific examples of where you might find proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. First of all, let's talk about carbohydrates. I'll give you some specific examples of carbohydrates. Fruits are carbohydrates. Vegetables are carbohydrates. Starches are carbohydrates. Now, we all remember the diabetic who fell to the floor and needed some sugar. And you gave them just a little bit of orange juice. You just tapped the orange juice to their lips and they woke up. Why is that? That's because the fruit, the basic fruit, that basic carbohydrate, is so easily absorbed into the system that it gets into the bloodstream and to the brain, poof, just that fast. It's passively absorbed, actually. These kinds of fruits and other highly glycemic vegetables, highly glycemic, meaning that they're immediately available, that they still have the same number of calories as low glycemic. It's just that they're so immediately available. And they don't usually have other products mixed up with them. Orange juice, for instance, would be the perfect example of a very highly glycemic carbohydrate. It immediately gets into your system and immediately goes to your brain. Vegetables and starches are usually lower glycemic lower glycemic carbohydrates because they have other stuff in them, usually the stuff called fiber. Fiber, not absorbed. We do not have the proper enzymes to absorb fiber. If you can't absorb it, it's not used for nutrition. It doesn't have calories. No calories. Fiber has no calories. It goes through your system, takes a little water with it actually, but you'll never see fiber with calories by it. You'll see how many grams, but you won't see calories because fiber has no calories. So when you're eating broccoli, you're eating the starch of the broccoli or the carbohydrate and the fiber. The fiber doesn't have the calories, but it mixes with the other carbohydrates in the digestive process, and it takes a little longer for your body to absorb it. Hence, it's lower glycemic. Starches. Starches are generally a little more highly glycemic depending upon the starch, but what you're looking at are things like pasta, potato, and rice. In fact, you've probably heard it said a gazillion times, don't eat that white stuff. That white stuff is usually highly starchy, glycemic carbohydrates. And generally speaking, those are the things that make us fat. We're going to talk about that in later subjects, but for right now, you need to understand that fruits and starch are much more highly glycemic. Vegetables, the likes of broccoli, cauliflower, asparagus, have a lot of fiber in them. Other vegetables are not quite so fibrous and are actually much more glycemic, and I will list them for you now. They would be carrots, peas, for instance. Some beans are very highly glycemic. They also have some protein in it, however. But if you're going to look at where you're going to get calories and where you're going to get the most glycemic vegetables, you only need to look at what these vegetables are. Carrots, for instance, are the root of a plant. The root of a plant stores a lot of calories because it feeds the plant. On the other hand, broccoli is the flower of the plant, and the flower of the plant doesn't have as many calories. Therefore, you're better off eating broccoli than carrots. In fact, if you have a choice and it's dessert time, it will be my recommendation that you don't eat a pack of carrots, 35 calories a piece, 10 carrots, 350 calories, have a couple bites of pumpkin pie, and enjoy yourself. In any event, that's carbohydrates. Secondly, we're going to talk about fats. What are fats? Fats are those 9 calorie per gram things that are made up of triglycerides. And triglycerides that's that fatty substance that you have with meat. You'll find fats usually with either protein, or you'll find fats with vegetables. There are vegetable fats, therefore, and protein fats. Nuts have a lot of fat with them. For instance, walnuts, almonds, peanuts. They taste good, they've got protein, but they're also going to have fat. Fat is very necessary. But I look at fat like I look at styrofoam. You know, when you pack your bag with styrofoam and it kind of is the filler, it doesn't weigh very much, but it's the filler. That's what fat is. Fat doesn't weigh very much because we store fat in an anhydrous state. In other words, it is not stored with water. Therefore, it doesn't weigh anything. You've probably been to the store and you tell them, take that fat off that beef. I don't want that fat. And you're thinking you're going to save money. You may have noticed maybe a couple pennies, not very much. Because the fat doesn't weigh anything. It just takes up space. Right here, right here, right here. And it doesn't look so good either. Kind of that stipply stuff. But fat is very necessary. We have to have it as a kind of a backup unit. So fat is necessary to keep our energy on board and to store, but indeed it is only excess energy. We're going to first use our carbohydrates for energy. You're going to use that carbohydrate that's stored first. So fats, indeed, try to stay away from them, although I'm going to tell you in a future lecture why they're not quite so bad. Proteins. Proteins are beef, fish, chicken, etc. Now, you want to know how many calories are in each kind of protein? It's very simple. The protein, you can figure it out again, just like we did with vegetables. What's the protein? Where does it hang out? The fish that float to the surface, like salmon, have more fat with them. Those that sink to the bottom, like Dover sole, have less fat in them. This is more caloric than that. So your salmon and your fatty fishes, mackerel, are much more caloric. Dover sole, haddock, halibut, and even tuna is much less caloric. Looking at a chicken, all you have to know is what part of the chicken meat you're eating. If you're eating the white meat, then usually that is much less fatty than the dark meat. The dark meat is found on the back where it's sitting, where the fat is stored, right? The white meat is the wing, and there isn't much fat stored on the wing because who would want to store fat in the thing that's moving the most? You want that to be lean and trim. So if you want to know what you're eating, you just need to know what part of the animal you're eating. The same with the cow. It doesn't sound so hotsy-totsy, I know, when you think about eating protein from a cow, but that's what beef is. The filet mignon is closer to the rump. It's got a lot of fat. It's got a lot of calories. But you can get very good beef that has as few calories as fish, actually, from the shoulder roast, etc. They're usually tougher pieces of beef. You have to cook them longer and harder and add a lot of spice, but they're still beef, and stew beef, there's certainly nothing wrong with it, and it's an excellent protein. So, proteins, carbohydrates, and fats again. Where do you find them? You go to your grocery store, and all you have to do is use your brain and think, what am I eating? Am I eating the root of a plant? It's probably going to have calories. Am I eating a fish that floats? It's going to be more fatty. Am I eating a plant that's really the flower, like cauliflower? It's probably going to be less caloric, and it's got a lot of fiber in it, and it's not going to have a lot of calories. And remember, the fiber has no calories. So now you can kind of pick your fruits and vegetables and proteins, and you can pretty much decide what you want to eat by what you like, but also, if you don't care if it's sole or salmon and you want to save your calories, pick the sole. It's a simple and cheap way to choose a less caloric protein.